Hello and welcome to the Jesus-Centered Family Podcast, where we talk about ministry, parenting, and equipping every generation to intentionally live a Jesus-centered life. Hey everyone, how's it going?
Good.
Good.
So good.
Good. It's good to be back. We haven't had this group since before Christmas.
It's been a while.
Wow.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about Christmas and be like, hey, how was your Christmas? But it feels weird in February. But also, why not? How was your Christmas?
Great.
Good?
Busy.
Busy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
well,
busy? Good
Yeah.
busy or bad busy?
It was a good busy. I mean, we had a son get married, graduate from college, all while Christmas was happening.
That
So
is
it
very
was-
busy.
yeah,
Did you
was
guys
good.
fly out the day after Christmas?
We drove and we
Oh, you
left.
drove.
We couldn't leave the day after because he had to go to Chicago to get his passport situation rectified. But we left the day after that. So we left on the 27th.
Okay. So you had Christmas,
Mhm.
had a wedding, had to go get a passport, all the things.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
It was busy.
And you survived.
Yes.
Good work. Good job. Anybody else have anything that exciting?
I did the wedding.
You did the wedding,
I
so
did
you
the
got to
wedding.
be there.
So yeah, that was we've never done it before.
Yeah.
Be away from home in between Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah.
So stayed.
Did your whole family go?
Just Will, and we took my nephew
Okay.
with us and stayed at my aunt and uncle's condo because they were up here in Indiana visiting family. So we went down and used their condo. So it worked out pretty well for us.
That's convenient.
Yeah. Worked
I
out
always
very good.
I always say, like, hey, if you have a destination wedding, like, talk to me. I'd love to do your destination wedding. Hasn't happened yet, though.
Right.
That's fun. Cool. Troy, what about you?
Very
Anything
nice.
exciting?
Nothing too exciting. Spent most of the weeks at home with the kids, and that was a lot, but it was fun. Wintertime is hard when you're stuck inside and you're just trying to figure out things to do, but overall went really well.
Good.
Yep.
So today we are starting a 2-part series on marriage and parenting, and we are following what County Line is doing in our main services. So we did yesterday. We're recording on Monday, so yesterday it was week 1 and it was on marriage, and so we're going to talk about that and kind of give our own thoughts and do some things like that. If you are listening and you did not listen to the sermon, that's okay, but I would highly recommend you go back and listen to it. We were texting about it last night. I thought it was like really solid.
It was.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
Really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think he covered about everything you can.
Yeah.
For a marriage one-time sermon. So yeah, I thought he did a very good job of trying to encompass everything in every facet.
Yeah. So just for some context, all 4 of us are married. How long have each of you guys been married? Dane, you got to count. Okay, we'll start with Stacy.
I was doing the same thing, like, oh, stink. What is he going to say? We've been married for 25 years.
25. Wow, big one.
I was going to say, I think I'm the baby in the group. We've only been married 13.
Only, man.
Yeah.
We hit 15 this
Yeah.
past Christmas time.
22.
22.
Going to be 23 in June.
Okay, so a lot of years of marriage between us, but I always like to say I am not the poster child for like advocating for singleness or like waiting till you're older to get married, because we got married young. I'm guessing that was your story too.
21, 22?
I'm guessing that was y'all's stories too.
20, yeah.
I got married when I was 27.
Okay,
So that was a little bit later than.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're closer to like the national
I
average.
know
today.
that it is. I think that it's different for every state. I think I was talking to you about this. I saw a statistic that came through on some article that they said what the average is for every state in the United States. And Indiana was one of the lower ones, but it was still like 26, I think, or
Wow.
27. The highest was 30.
Yeah,
So yeah, a lot of singleness going on.
yeah, for sure. Or just waiting, till your late
Waiting.
20s, early 30s to get married.
Yeah.
So the main point from yesterday's sermon was marriage done God's way is the best way. I think every believer in God can probably agree with that, but I think there would probably be a lot of differences in the definition of that. So if you had 30 seconds to sum up that bottom line, marriage done God's way is the best way, how would you summarize what that means? Stacy?
See, you know, I'm
You
the
were
one who
looking
likes
at
to
me.
process.
But you were looking at me. You seemed like you were ready.
Okay, so without processing, I think simply said that if you want to have a marriage that is successful, and that takes a lot of work, if you're doing it the way God has called us to be a wife and be a husband, you're going to have much more success if you do it the way God has called you to do it than if you try and do it any other way.
Yeah, that's good. Dane?
Yeah, the way I look at it is if we truly believe that he's the designer, the creator of marriage, then he's going to know the best way.
Mm-hmm.
And now, again, people that don't believe that, they're not going to adhere to whatever God says. But if you are someone that believes that God is the creator and the originator of this institution of marriage, then he is going to provide you with the best way to live that out. And I think we can find that through Scripture. Is it easy all the time? And Stu made that very clear yesterday. No, it is not. It's hard work. My dad used to say it's giving 100% all the time. It's not a 50-50 relationship. It's 100% you have to give. So, yeah.
That's good. We like to tell people, like, hey, marriage is really hard, but like it can be really fun if done the right way.
Right.
Like it 100%. Does. I think a lot of times Christians get in this like, marriage is so hard. You gotta buckle down, and like it makes it sound awful. It's like, why would I want to do that? But like we're advocates for like marriage can be fun and marriage is exciting and like, but also yes, it does take 100% effort all the time. Troy,
I think we might get to this a little bit later, but I think there is some prep work when it comes to marriage too, as far as it. Stu talked a little bit about being equally yoked, being with someone that is a believer. And so being in when you're considering marriage, like that's part of marriage too, like that that time before marriage is important. And so being with the right person to some extent, and then, but also, having some boundaries and things that help you to set you up for a great marriage life is important as well. And kind of encompasses the whole aspect of marriage is also the time before you get married.
I can see the youth pastor coming at me there.
That's right. I deal a lot with that. My area ministry, they're not married yet, so you got to prep them for it.
Yeah,
so,
right. Yeah, and that's. Oh, go ahead. Were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that my dad actually gave my older sister and I a book when I was upper high school. I think she was in college, and it was all about preparing yourself for your future mate. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we don't think about. Mm-hmm. We don't think about what do I need to do in order to become the best possible spouse for someone. Mm-hmm. It's all about, that person's going to complete me. Mm-hmm. That person will make me better. Mm-hmm. But we never do the hard work ahead of time because we want to truly be the best spouse that we can be, especially if we're a Christ follower. Mm-hmm. And so what changes do I need to make? What do I need to work through in my own life to become the best spouse for my future mate?
Yeah, I think that's really good. We had, we're recording in February, so it is relationships, dating, sexual integrity, all that at our youth group. And so I'm the high school pastor, so I talk to high schoolers. So it's more focused on dating and what that looks like. And that's a lot. Like the first week, we really drilled down on focus on yourself and who God has called you to be before you worry about somebody else. So talking about getting that foundation set before you build the house is getting yourself right and knowing, like we looked at 1 Corinthians 13, like it talks about love and all these like characteristics of love. Like, yes, you want that in a mate, but also how are you doing with that in your own life and what does that look like for you? Mm-hmm. And I think that's super, super important. And you guys both hit really hard on that. It was good. All right. So I just texted you like 10 minutes before we started recording this and said, come with 2 to 3 highlights from the sermon that like stood out to you, or just like things that you're like, man, that was good. So I want to just kind of like hop around like popcorn, like one at a time. So I'm going to start with Troy. What was something that stood out to you in the sermon?
Yeah, so this was kind of a minor part, but I think it had to do with this idea of respecting your spouse. And I don't know if you guys have ever been in a small group or in a situation, maybe it's just a random couple, but one or the other says something pretty negative about the spouse in front of the group or in front of everyone else. And I think that is just such an important thing to remember when you're in a marriage relationship, is just showing honor and respect to your spouse in the midst of other people. And I think sometimes it can be very awkward if you're in a situation where they're just being mean to each other or saying something disrespectful throughout the night or whatever. And so that was just something small that Stu had mentioned at one point, of just being honoring and respectful of your spouse in the midst of company.
Yeah. That's something that I think is important. Yeah. In like a group setting, but maybe even more important when you're not with a group and like thinking about how you talk about your spouse to other people, especially the opposite sex, right? Like, I think you can get into some dangerous areas there if you're talking negatively about your spouse with somebody of the opposite sex. Like, I mean, I think one thing I've tried to do is talk highly of my wife anytime, regardless of what the morning looked like or the frustration of the time, like positive words, whether it's to her or to somebody else, because that you're communicating a lot by what you're sharing about your spouse. Sometimes it can be hard, but I think it's important. Stacy.
I think for me, the keep trying. He hit that towards the end of the service and just talked about you got to keep pursuing each other. And if one stops trying, you can't stop trying too, because then it's definitely going to, fall apart or you're going to have to work. And there are times where I think we coast in marriage where neither one of us are really trying. We're just getting through life some days, but pursuing each other, setting time aside for each other, communicating at the end of the day. But you have to keep trying in your marriage, whether it's good or bad. You have to put the effort forward to prioritize each other, prioritize where you're at emotionally or whatever. And I just think that is one of the biggest things, I think, when people start getting more inwardly, like, well, I deserve for him to set this time aside for me or whatever. You have to pursue him so that he sees I'm still pursuing you too. So just keep trying part of it. And I think it's ironic in many times when you see marriages who are really in crisis mode, that people don't stop trying in those. They really think like, one more time, I'll just try one more time, whatever that is. And it's the time where there's not really anything going on, that I'm just done. Like, I'm just over it kind of a thing too. So it's just odd how you see those patterns happen in marriage.
Yeah. Side note, we have some construction happening just across the wall that we're recording next to. So if you hear construction sounds, it's good things happening.
Exciting things are happening.
It's good things, but couldn't really avoid it today. Stacy, do you have like any practical things that like you and Justin put into place to try to make, you mentioned like putting the other person first or pursuing them. Like, is there anything that you guys have done that you found have been successful?
Honestly, like, as much as people want to complain about phones, it is one of the things that helps us during the day. Don't forget, I need to talk to you about this. Like, we'll send each other a small text throughout the day about different things that we need to communicate about that's too long to do in a text message, or it holds us accountable with things that we need to remember to. Or there's times where our kids are in the room and we're trying to have a conversation about something. We're like, can't say that in front of the kids or whatever. Like, shut that conversation down. We'll talk about it later or whatever. So for us, the texting back and forth has been good. And honestly, if there's been times where we've been in a heated conversation, it's so much easier to send a text because you don't want to text all the nasty things you wanted to say. You just want to get the point out. And you kind of like think, that looks really terrible for me to say. I'm not going to. So you text the basics of the hurt or the conversation, and not all of the emotion is attached to it too.
Interesting. Is that when you're like together you do this?
No.
Yeah.
No, like at work or like if he's traveling for work, there's times where we just can't have conversations. Right. So yeah.
That's interesting because I feel like when we started dating was like right when texting was like starting. And then like,
JB, I'm older than you.
I know. But we've always been like, texting gets us in trouble. Like we cannot fight through text because there's too many unsaid but read into things, and you don't know the emotions and the tone. And we're always like telling students like, don't text. It's going to get, like when you're fighting or whatever, or even premarital counseling type situations, like avoid texting and fights. But it's interesting to hear you come with that perspective of like, hey, I'm just getting the facts across.
Yes.
Have you guys established that like, hey, this is how we're going to do, just no.
It's just happened.
No. Yeah. Okay.
But we have friends of ours that they will email each other instead of having direct conversations in the heat of an argument because they don't listen. So when you type it out, you don't have the chance to interrupt or I didn't say that or whatever. Like you have the opportunity to say everything you need to say, and then they've done that too.
Yeah.
Maybe it depends on the personality. I don't know.
No, I tell students a lot, hey, if you're having a struggle with your parents, write them a letter.
Yes.
Because then it does take the emotions out. You can say, here's what I need to say, but I
Yes.
probably wouldn't. It would probably end up a screaming match.
Yep.
So like, it's just, when you said texting, it just struck me. I was like,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Dane, what's something that stood out to you?
Yeah, the Ephesians 5 passage, I think, is one, if you look at the historical context of marriage in the church, that a lot of churches have focused on, and it has good things in it. But like Stu, and we've talked about this in the past, Stu and I have talked about the passage where you start where it's talking about wives submit to their husbands, but the verse right above that in 21 actually says submit yourselves to one another. And it's the same word. The submit in 21 and the submit in 22 is the exact same verbiage. So, but of course, in our male-dominated society through the years, men have used that, churches have used that to try to lord over women or their wives, that you need to listen to me. And there is, like Stu talked about, I think, in the structure of the family, the husband is the father is supposed to be the head of the spiritual atmosphere and the culture of your family to set the tone for that. And statistics prove that. If kind of off a little bit, but they've actually interviewed kids or families, and if mom goes to church, I think it's like kids will follow 30% of the time. If dad goes to church, it's like 80% of the time kids will go to church. I mean, that's what the statistics say, and that proves that if dad goes to church, it means a lot more to the kids and to the family. So
I've seen that with teenagers, like, and I'll tell parents, if I can probably watch a dad in service, and if they're looking like they hate their life during worship, that's probably what the teenager is going to look like too. But if the dad is engaging in worship, regardless of what the mom is doing, no offense to moms, moms are great, but like I feel like it directly correlates, and that's exactly what you're saying too.
Yeah. So I think that, and when you read that passage, the men, the husbands, definitely have the greater responsibility, but we don't talk that way through the years. And I think it's changing. I think in the church it's changing, but we need to continue to beat that drum that if you want to be a husband that honors God, you have to sacrifice yourself like Christ sacrificed for the church. I mean, if you want to, what does that look like? You know, if we really get down to the nitty gritty, that every day you're dying to yourself of what you want for your family, whatever that looks like, for your wife specifically. And that is hard. That is hard. There's times that, yes, it comes easier, but the times that you're not wanting to do, I mean, so a lot of the responsibility, I think, is on the husbands. And I don't think, I'm just a little nervous about the future husbands and what that looks like in our culture, because it is changing, but I just don't know in a good way, but also in a negative way as well. So I don't know. I just think we need to, what does that look like then for a husband to sacrificially love their family? What does that really look like? And I'll just throw some ideas. Is it golfing every week? You know, when you want to do what you want to do, and yes, do we need time to have hobbies and things like that? Yes. But where is that line where I'm not going to go do this with my buddies because I want to do this with my wife or my family, and making those hard calls. And that's tough. And it is more responsibility on the guy, on the husband, to do that.
I would also add that it's not working 60 to 80 hours a week.
Right.
That's not loving your family well. Like, I feel like there's been like in our generation, like in millennials, you know, in general, don't work as hard. I think that's kind of a good stereotype for them. But I would say that millennials in general are better fathers than the generations previous because they spend more time with their kids. But then there's also that rebound effect too. Like, then they're maybe not working as hard, or, jump from job to job or whatever. But yeah, it's good stuff, Dane. Thanks. I had like multiple. I said 2 to 3, and I ended up with 4. But I thought this wasn't even a huge thing. Like, it was just a small thing at the beginning. But Stu made the point that God instituted marriage before any house, like hundreds of years before any house of worship was ever established. And I think so often marriage gets tagged on to church, and like, oh, the church has made it this and the church does this. And I think the church has, and in many ways, I think the church has like put marriage, as an idol in some ways. We can get to that later, but I just thought that was an interesting point that marriage was instituted. We know that, like, I use Genesis a lot when I do officiate weddings, like, but not thinking about the idea that marriage was there long before the church was there. And so God, you said earlier, like, God created it, so God probably has the best ideas on it. So if we're really going to know, like, oh, what should marriage look like, let's consult God before we consult like what the church has traditionally made it to be.
In college, I was taking a class about family ministry, and it was in the book that we were reading. It talked about the Puritans and how they saw their family as a little church.
That's good.
And I think that's an interesting concept to think about. Like, and that's what we try to do here with Sticky Faith, right? That is the church, is the families with little churches make up a big church. But we don't see it as that. I go to the big building, I go to the place where we have church, but ultimately church is, like you said, it's that thing that God created from the very beginning of what it's supposed to look like and be within our families.
Yeah. And I don't think that concept doesn't have to take away from the larger church, the community gathering, because I think that's still super important.
Yeah.
But like we say, what happens at home is more important than what happens at church. Troy, back to you.
Yeah. The other thing that I liked was, and again, we touched on this just a little bit earlier, but just being with someone that is a Christ follower, and just how important that really is. I know growing up, you kind of get in relationships that maybe you're not a big deal, but it's very quickly, I think I've seen illustrations of this where it's like someone's standing up on something. It's much easier to pull them down than it is to pull them up. And I think that can be just such a good illustration of what it's like to be in a relationship with a non-believer. And so just trying to avoid that pain before marriage. I know that can be really hard. So much of love and relationships has to do with humor or looks or whatever else it might be. And sometimes faith kind of gets the back burner in relationships. And I think it should be a little bit more towards the front when we think about who we're going to marry. So
I think that ends up playing into a lot of different areas. Even like you're talking about the preparation going into marriage. We talk with our hands way too much on here. Like, we keep hitting it. But that preparation piece, like if one person is a Christ follower and has those values set in place, and the other person is not, like, that's going to create conflict. Yeah. And
from money to how you spend your Sunday mornings, or how you spend your time with serving or things like that. It just can cause a lot of tension when you're thinking
and with
about
your kids.
With your kids, yeah. And
that'll be
do they go to church or do they stay home? Or there's just a lot of decisions for someone that's following Christ, and in any marriage, that sometimes the temptation can be to put the other person even before God. And I think when you're in a relationship that isn't equally yoked or whatever, then it's hard not to put someone that maybe isn't the Christ follower above God. And so, as a husband and my wife isn't following Christ, it's hard for me not to put her above Christ, because I want to love her and do what's right. And so the decisions you make can be impacted pretty
and
severely.
There's a good book, as Stu mentioned, that Spiritual Mismatch book. If you find yourself in, like, maybe you weren't Christians when you got married, and then one of them became Christian, a follower of Christ, and so you're in this spiritual mismatch. It was written by, I believe, Lisa, is her name, Lisa Strobel, Lee Strobel's wife.
Okay.
Because he wasn't a believer, she became a believer, and he eventually does. But she talks about what she went through and how people were praying for him on a regular basis, and she was attending small group, and how do I interact with him, and powerful story. Yeah, powerful story.
Do you know, is that book, we have a list of resources on the website. Is that book in that list of resources?
Yeah, yep,
okay.
It's on
So we'll put that in the notes, the same resource list.
And it's actually kind of an older book. I want to say early 2000s, maybe. It's been around.
I thought
a
you were
while.
going to go like 80s or 90s.
No.
But early 2000s.
I
is
almost
old.
went late 90s, but I think it's early 2000s. But yeah, it's a great book. That there's not a lot of books written about that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one that we've been that we go to on a regular basis. Now, going off what Troy said, I think another interesting question to think about is, we talk about a non-believer and a believer. What if you're both believers, but someone is of a different denomination?
Yes.
Or you have a Catholic Protestant relationship.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that? Because again, though there's some very hardcore traditions within certain denominations when it comes to marriage, when it comes to certain attending a church, what do you guys think about that? Or where have you seen that play out?
I was going to ask the exact same question. Like, what's the line? Like, where does it go from unequally yoked to equally enough yoked? You know, I don't know. What do you guys think?
So our child is nowhere near marriage, but he is dating a young lady who has been raised in the Catholic Church, and this has been a very big conversation that my husband and I have had, as well as with him. And you have to be so careful when your kids get to be 18 years old and having conversations that lead them to the truth rather than me, this is the truth kind of a thing. And so we've had a lot of conversations. He has only been in the Catholic Church 2 times in his entire life. And the second time he sent us a text and said, "Thank you for raising me in the church that we go to, because I don't like this." And so then when he came home, we talked about what does that mean? What does that mean that you didn't like it? What bothered you? Where did that sit with you? What was it that you believe doesn't match up with what you saw happening there? And so it's been a lot of conversationing. Now he's still in a relationship with this young lady. She has been coming to church with him, and there's been conversations between the two of them. So we are constantly asking, so what did she think of this? How did you conversation about that? So it has been challenging to have a conversation about the differences between and not dishonoring what she believes. And so it's hard to navigate that. Again, we're nowhere near a marriage situation there, so we're not having to walk down that aisle yet. I didn't even mean that. It's a habit. But it has definitely been a conversation that he pursues back with us. Now, initially it was us pursuing him because he didn't even have any idea that there was a difference. He just thought we're all Christians. Like that was not an understanding for him. So that conversation has been happening both ways, and I'm so glad that that's happening. He stands pretty firm in what he believes, and he knows that that's important moving forward.
Yeah. And I think we try to, in our culture, love trumps all, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what they grow up in, this mindset. All the Disney shows and all the TV, romantic shows. Love trumps all. So you'll be able to work through it. Right. You'll be fine because your love for each other will be stronger than anything. Yeah. That might happen, but it may not as well, because I think that's the hard thing too, is your belief in whatever denomination or your core principles of theology. Is that greater than your love for a person for marriage? Because those can conflict.
Yeah.
And so what does that look like? I mean, it's a tough, and I'm glad you're having that conversation, because it's helping him know why he believes what he believes.
Yes.
And it's helping her.
For sure, because
where
there's
she
been
stands.
lots of conversations between the two. Like, we'll ask him a question and he won't know the answer. So then he'll go back and have another conversation with her, and then, well, this is what she said. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. But I think that as parents, we want to be able to have those conversations with him to help guide him, but not tell him. Like asking questions that hopefully lead back around the train the right way. But it has been, and it's been good for us to be able to have that conversation, and our younger kids hearing it too, because it's not really a thing we've talked about before. It's never come up for us to even consider, and that's probably a parenting conversation we need to have.
Yeah. I think some of that, specifically in this lane, I guess even if, Protestant versus which denomination, like some of it is like, what are the traditions of the family? Like, what is their church like? With your son, like, is it, hey, there will be a Catholic wedding, and you'll do these things, and you'll baptize your babies, and what's how forgive me, this is probably going to sound bad, but how Catholic are they?
Right.
Like, I think there's a scale, and
Right.
I think it's.
I've seen it a lot when I've done baby dedication here, in talking with every single couple before they dedicate their child. And some of them have come wanting to baptize their child, and then we have that conversation. But so many of them, when they got married, came from a different background, and how they've made the decision to be at County Line and make the decisions they are, but they are hesitant in their baby dedication decision. What are you going to say? Are you going to talk about this because they want their parents to hear why they've made the choice they made, because they are not able to have that conversation because my parents are Catholic or my parents are Lutheran or whatever. So they get to hear, like, can you please lay the foundation in that environment so they know why we're doing what we're doing? So it is, I think that's probably been an aha moment for Justin and I, that we want to be able to have those conversations with our kids and not be some pastor standing at the front of an event that they're going to have someday down the road.
I think, like, my grandparents are Catholic, and kind of one of the things that we've had conversations with them about with baby dedications and with baptism is, okay, in our church, like, for us, baby dedications are similar to what you guys would see as infant baptisms.
Yes.
And then like, our baptisms are similar to what you would see, like, with confirmation, like, and your first communion. Like, it's our kids' first kind of opportunity to say, hey, this is what I'm choosing. Like, I want this to be a part of who I am. And I think that's helped in our conversations with them to be able to, like, really grasp what this is. And I think there's a lot of common ground there for people to be able to like meet in the middle and say, oh, there is some similarities. Like, there are some major differences, but there are sometimes more similarities than what we see, which could also get us into trouble because I'm like, oh, we're basically the same thing. Like, let's just keep going down this road.
Yeah. It's such a hard conversation. I remember there was a couple. One, he was Catholic, she was Protestant, and they were, because we had that conversation, like, what are you going to do moving forward? And their premarital counseling, and they kind of made the compromise that we'll go to both. I don't. Again, they don't attend here anymore, so I don't know where they're at with that.
They didn't go to both.
You might for a month, and then you're done with that. But again, the kids will become the harder conversation, and somebody again has to give in. You can't. How do you move forward with that? And it would be nice to say, well, let's just focus on Jesus, and we'll tell our kids to love Jesus. And I wish we could focus, but there's so many other traditional theological things that get pulled in to that conversation, and it's tough.
Even just where you're going to go on a weekend. Like,
Right.
sure, like, teach your kids about Jesus, but, like, are you going to this church or that church? Like, you've got to decide that within the marriage and make that a unified thing before you, like, I don't know, turn it over to your kids, I guess. Like, it's a tough thing. Any other thoughts on that before we move on? Good conversation. I think one of the things that stood out to me was Stu hit pretty hard on living together before you're married is not a good thing. I think you can look into lots of research that says this is not the healthy way to go. But I think more and more we see young adults, even to older adults, living together before they get married. Usually with the concept of, well, we want to know that it's going to work, and we want to make sure the chemistry's there. And I would continue to say, it's not how it works. Like, I think there's something special about marriage and entering into that covenant, that union, that changes when you decide to live together.
And you're going in with a presupposition that this may not work out.
Yeah.
And I think when you go in with that presupposition, you have a door open.
Yeah.
That, okay, in case they're not my soulmate or whatever, then I have my way out.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning of the potential slow decline of that reasoning happening. And I think that comes back to, you make a choice to love someone, you make a choice to stay in the marriage, you make a choice to have fun in marriage, you make a choice. It's a choice that you do that. And so you don't have to try on the shoe before you wear it. That's what they use a lot. And it's a choice that you're going to have to make. And so And God, again, it comes back to if you're an unbeliever, live together, whatever you want to do in terms of that, because that's you have no adherence to God or Scripture. But if you say you're a Jesus follower, and I think this is where we're seeing a lot of it.
Yeah.
They are living together and they don't see any issue with it. And they always say, oh, we'll be sexually
We're
pure.
sleeping in separate bedrooms.
Yeah, separate bedrooms and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, whatever.
My argument to that is if your attraction to each other is not strong enough, that desire is overwhelming, maybe you should reconsider this.
That's a good
marriage
point.
altogether.
Yeah. Use some different reasoning there on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. And I think that's the troublesome trend is that we're loosening up our view of that, the sanctity of marriage or before marriage and allowing us to just go do whatever I want because that's what everybody else does.
Mm-hmm.
And we have talked to numerous couples that have said that, like people ask them.
But it saves them money, Dane.
Yeah, that's another thing. And I will say this, if that is truly a indicator or a obstacle for them, we as the church must step up and do something about that. That's
so.
We find people in the church that will house them for 6 to 9 months. If it comes down to financial, maybe we help them. I think we would find people that were willing to house a young man or young woman for a short time period so that they could honor God. I think we would find people like that. But I think as churches, we can't just say, well, that's your problem, that's your fault. We've got to step up and say, okay, we believe in this so much that we're willing to sacrifice in this way to help you.
Yeah. I think that's a big faith step. If you do make that decision, you say, hey, I'm going to be uncomfortable for a little bit so that I can honor God, honor my future spouse, and do this for now. Or talking about the unequally yoked, like, hey, I'm going to give up this relationship because this is what God's best for me is not to be unequally yoked with this person. And that may be really, really hard because you may be very connected. You may have also already crossed some sexual lines and sexual boundaries, and that's also going to create some other issues. But if God is calling you if you are in a relationship that is not honoring God, we need to step back and think about what is actually going to be the God honoring thing here.
Well, and if I can take what's the word I want? If I want to slide a little bit here and then we get married, why wouldn't I want to slide a little bit here then? Why honor God all of a sudden now that I'm in a marriage versus before I'm married?
Yeah.
Because that's a slippery slope. Like you begin to justify things in your head, even when you're married, about, like you were saying, about talking with someone of the opposite sex, about your relationship or your marriage or whatever. And I think we're just as susceptible. So set the trend now that we are going to hold fast and create safety and security and trust in your relationship by saying we're not going to live together. We're going to trust God. It's tough though. It's tough.
Yeah.
The peer pressure is strong.
For sure.
The cultural pressure,
it's
it is what people do. But I would even say, like you mentioned, whether they're a Jesus follower or not, it's hard to hold them to different standards. I even challenge, and I think you do too, when we've talked about this in premarital counseling, challenge a couple to say, hey, I challenge you from here until your wedding to remain abstinent, to not have sex from this moment. If that means one of you needs to move out or, you put up some serious boundaries, but I think it's so worth it to wait until your marriage happens. I just think there's something, it gives us a new special meaning to that wedding day and that ceremony that didn't exist before.
Yeah. And it develops self-control.
Yes.
Again, I go back to that trust issue. If we can have self-control with each other, then if you're on a business trip, then I can have trust that you will have self-control. And I think that's, again, you're just building, and we don't see it as that, but it's hard to convince people of that, but you're really building trust at a deeper level when you adhere and want to follow that. Is it difficult? Sure.
Yeah.
We've all been there. It's very difficult to stay on God's path of purity up even when you're engaged and you're a few months away because of the attraction that you have. But again, it builds trust and self-discipline, self-control that can help in your future marriage.
Yeah.
And you're choosing to do something hard together.
Mm-hmm.
And so when something else comes along in your relationship, whether it be a financial decision or a move or something that the both of you are having to come to a common ground and battle for something together for the first time before you even step into your marriage relationship. And it's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it's not easy, but it's great practice to start for something you're going to have to do your entire married life.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think just kind of tagging along with this a little bit is just thinking about just the gift you get to give to your spouse or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If you are able to stay pure, or if that is something that is such an amazing thing that you get to share with one person. And I think that's just such a powerful thing that is also just such a benefit of remaining abstinent until marriage, and just such a beautiful thing that God has designed for a specific reason to be shared within marriage. And if that's something that again has already been crossed or whatever, like, it's still an amazing thing that you can focus on and try to be as pure as you can with the person you're currently with. But I think that's just another, again, just a gift is a word that I would use to describe that. So
Yeah, and that topic is really difficult to, like, there's not statistics that you can like point to and be like, well, this couple like it all you can go by is like personal testimony and say like for us it was worth it. Like, it was difficult at times. Our parents were very helpful in setting some actual like physical boundaries for us, but like it's difficult to get there, but it's so worth it. But I don't have statistics to back it up.
Right. There is one that I have seen. It's like, and this is maybe, it was 5% of marriages that go into it with a virgin wife, and like only within the first 5 years, only 5% of them. And so that's not necessarily like, whereas it's usually the first 5 years is a really hard time, and a lot of couples do get divorced sometimes within that first 5 years. If there's a virgin wife, then statistically goes down a lot.
Is that
I don't know if that's necessarily
just specifically with the wife?
the one that I saw.
Interesting.
Yes. I don't. That is a little bit.
A little Old Testament there.
Yeah, maybe a little biased or something.
If you take yourself a virgin bride, then you are more likely.
Definitely a little maybe skewed there to some extent. But I think probably if it's two virgins, then the statistics for getting
2.5%.
marriage or after that. So, anyways, yeah.
And I think Stu, if he brought up all the scriptures that God talks about, and we have a purity covenant here at church for those that want to get married, and it lists, I don't know how many, 20, 25 verses where God specifically says, and it goes back to, if you really believe God's way is the best way, then we'll try to do our best to try to follow that. And he's doing it not to rob us of the fun or the enjoyment of what he created, but in some ways he wants us to enjoy it to the fullest. And that's in the context of a marriage. So I think that's, again, it's the battle of the voices. What voice you're going to listen to, what media, the world says, or what God says.
Yeah. All right. What were some other things that stood out? We kind of lost track of our circle that we're going around. Stacy?
Dane just kind of hit on it for me. The amount of scripture that Stu shared yesterday, literally scattered throughout the entire word. I loved that there was so much evidence of what God says about marriage across the board. It was all over the place in the Bible. And again, I think it's just more proof that this is so important to the Lord, that it's mentioned so many times, New Testament, Old Testament, just all over, for us to continue to draw ourselves back into the obedience that he's calling us to. And I really loved that he hit so many different spaces throughout the word.
And I felt like with that, he addressed everybody in the room.
For sure. It didn't matter where you were at in your life, what decisions you have or have not made, young, old, married, not married, all of those. Like, what are you doing to honor God? And what is your testimony, no matter where you are on that spectrum of not yet married to married for forever, divorced, whatever. Where are you called to honor God? And you don't want to be the reason that someone believes something that's not true of God's word. Yeah. And so just making sure we're all checking in and doing a little observation of our own, where we're at right now in our own lives. I really loved all of that.
Yeah, that was good. Troy, what else? You got anything else?
Another one?
We might have to go for 3.
3. You said something. Oh, no. we haven't really talked much about the singleness aspect,
No.
right? Yeah.
I was
So
just
that
thinking
was
about that.
yeah, that was another main topic that he talked about, and I think just a huge thing to remember for people that maybe haven't been in a relationship, or honestly, I think that there's just a lot of people that I remember in college. There was this one girl in particular. She's just like, I want to die for Christ, and like that's great, but like she was like, marriage wasn't a thing for her. Like another person was not on her radar. Like just living fully for Christ was like the only thing that mattered. And I think we all would say that we like that idea and would love to make that true, but we also want to be in relationships and we want to have a family, and like all of those things are important too. But again, all that to say, like singleness is an amazing option and not to be dismissed as lesser than.
Yes.
Which I think JB mentioned a little earlier is we talk so much about marriage and how to have a successful marriage that we don't talk about singleness or people that have chosen that, or that's their I don't know, that's what's happening in their life currently.
Yeah, I think the phrase I used earlier was like we've kind of idolized marriage, almost to the extent of like if you don't get married and have kids, like you haven't completed your duty as a Christian, and that's not true. Like we see lots of examples probably more examples from the Bible, like in support of being single than like and being able to honor God and do that. Like, and so again, I'm not the poster child for singleness. Like I got married when I was 21. So, but I think there is a huge call, and like people that feel called to like, hey, I just want to live for Jesus. And I think that's amazing. I think we should make more space for that in the church. But I think it's just been such a cultural piece of it for so long. It's hard to like dig back out of that. And there is enormous value in marriage also. So it's just like, how do we find that balance? But,
I know my older sister Shannon, she is single, has been single for a while. Her husband divorced her, but I think she has felt that through the years, that the church focuses a lot on marriage and not on singleness, or what does that look like? And that is very true, because a lot of the people in the room that are single are saying, well, I wish I had this, or this is not for me. If that's all you specifically talk about is you have a 4-week series just on marriage. Well, as a single person, do I check out then for the next 4 weeks because I'm not in this category?
Right.
So how do you delicately deal with that and talk about it all at once so you can hit? And I think, again, Stu talked about it at the end, specifically about Paul and how you can do more for the Lord when you are single. The responsibilities aren't there. But I still think, and maybe you guys, another question for this, do you guys still think in the church, when you see maybe not necessarily a single woman, but a single man, do you think there's a negative connotation towards someone like that? You know what I'm saying? When somebody gets into their early 40s and they've never been married and they're a guy, because of our culture, do we begin to have questioning thoughts? And again, if you're out there and you're in that category, we do not.
You're not saying that.
I'm just wondering if, because we talk so much about marriage and those type of things, and the way the culture is now with certain things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it does.
Tough.
Like
and I feel bad for
has
that,
created
for those guys.
questions around that.
Yes.
Like, well, what's the story? Like, there's got to be a story,
right?
And I don't think that has to be true all the time.
Exactly. I just don't know if as a church as a whole we do well at that.
As a capital C church.
Yes.
Capital
C church. I don't know if we do well with that.
Yep. I think one last thing maybe I want to talk about is divorce. Stu is very strong on divorce is only acceptable in a couple instances. One of those being sexual immorality. So that's sexual activity outside of marriage. And then an unbelieving spouse leaving you. And I think there's one more. I don't remember what the third one was that he said. I thought there was a third one that he mentioned. But
I think he was talking about the release of marriage when someone dies. Your spouse dies. Maybe that's what it is.
I don't know. But yeah, but that's a very strong, and you kind of hit on it earlier about going into it with maybe this won't work, going into marriage with that mindset, like we can't approach marriage in that way. Like I know I come from divorced parents, and I know the statistics are you're more likely to get divorced if your parents have gotten divorced. And that was something we set very early on, like before when we were in high school. Like, hey, if this ever leads to marriage, divorce will not be an option. And so that I think has to be our mentality. But in our society, in our culture, divorce is so prevalent. Why do you guys think that divorce has become such a viable option for people today?
This is hard. And this is going to sound judgy, so I hate to say this, but I do believe that divorce has become so prevalent because of selfishness. And not necessarily saying that one spouse has made the decision because they're selfish, but someone gets selfish within that marriage relationship that they stop pursuing the other person. And so the breakdown starts to take place. We are so me driven in all things. I don't care what it is. If it's obviously a young child is that way, and we hopefully grow outside of that as we become adults. But it's such a selfish, we live in such a selfish society that everything is about, well, that isn't what I wanted, or that's not what I deserve, or whatever. And so I do think it starts with a seed of selfishness in many circumstances. You're not fulfilling me. You're not loving me the way I would need to be loved. Whatever. It starts with a seed of selfishness.
Yeah.
And I think you stop growing as a person. I mean, it kind of feeds off of the me, but you have to continue to learn about who you are and who you're becoming as a person. And in the context of being a Christ follower, am I becoming more like Christ or not? Yeah. And because I think if you do, and your spouse is doing the same, you'll have that desire to stay together. But we stop. We kind of get in the rut of our faith, or maybe there's certain things that we've never worked through from growing up, or we've been hurt in the past, or whatever the case may be, and we were too prideful to go see a counselor and talk through it, and so that we can again be healing, so that we can have the best marriage possible. And we don't want to have to do that hard work. We don't have to. It's too difficult. So there's so many different probably things in the Christian world. I think it comes down to that the soulmate idea is way out there too. I think there's a lot of the movies have created that. Well, you're not my soulmate. Well, what is even a soulmate? I think I heard, is it Jonathan Pokluda?
Yeah.
That concept actually is Greek mythology. That's where the soulmate is a Greek mythology. That's where it comes from. I never heard that before, and he mentioned that. So it's not even biblical, whatever their that idea. So, but anyway, yeah, I think we have to continue to want to grow as a person in our lives, spiritually, personally, emotionally, knowing our personality. I mean, it just that we stop doing that, and I don't care to do that about me anymore. So it's not going to work out.
Yeah. So I think we've probably heard the divorce rate in the United States for, 20, 30 years. And it's consistently been the Christian divorce rate is similar. Yeah. Sometimes I've heard higher, sometimes I've heard lower, but close to similar as the secular, the non-Christian divorce rate. Why do you think that is, that they would be right about the same?
I'd like to interview those people and say, what do you mean by a Christian?
Okay.
When they marked it on the survey.
Okay.
There's a lot of cultural Christianity. I think that's going away more so, but I think there's a lot of people that say, yeah, I'm a Christian. Well, what does that really mean for you? I don't know if that would change that statistic or not.
Yeah. Do you guys have thoughts?
I was thinking something along those lines, but I'd also kind of just add in maybe a little bit of I would hope that, churches are able to provide support that couples need. And I think sometimes the church is the last place a couple wants to come to if they're dealing with a hard time, because there is like a stigma around my marriage is broken, and is church a safe place to come to deal with that? And I'd hope that can be a better example for us to follow, is trying to be a place where broken marriages can come, find healing, and so that doesn't really answer your question.
Yeah, no.
But
I think along those, so often people wait until it's like past crisis mode, like, hey, like I've got the papers in hand, I need help, or I'm giving him the papers, like, and it's just like, oh, you waited 2 years too long, or whatever it is.
I think you got to be honest with yourself.
What do you mean?
Again, I go back to what I just said. You have to take inventory of who you are, and who you're becoming. Do you even like it? Do you even like who you are right now? Do you even like who you're becoming? Are you working the 60, 80 hours a week? Are you, doing what you want to do, and not exuding or practicing love or peace, or it's not even on your radar. And there's a lot of factors that go in, right? Your boss, your work is difficult, your boss is difficult, your situation, there's all these circumstances, right, that can come. I've heard of people not being able to stay together because of the death of a child. Those are, again, circumstances that are out of their control, and how do we move past that? How do we work through those things? And I just don't think we do enough self-evaluation, and it's all about, if they, like what Stu said yesterday, if they would just change, if they would just do this, then our marriage would be better. But in reality, it goes back to, we both got to do 100%. We both, and what does that look like? We get lazy. For sure. I think a lot of it's laziness. For sure. Like we're just lazy in relationships. We're lazy about who we are. We get numb to in our routines, and it's it's just important that we stay in tune with who we are and who we're becoming. Are we becoming more like Christ or not?
Well, some positive news on the divorce side of things. I saw a study by Bowling Green State University. Shout out Zach Patrick, our Falcon. But the divorce rate in the United States in 2020 and 2021 was at the lowest point since the 1960s.
Wow.
So there's some positive news there, and it had like steadily gone down since like 2010. The highest was in like the 70s and 80s. So I mean, it's eked back up. I think COVID really, people were like, it's fine, I'm trapped inside anyway. I think more people made babies during COVID than got divorces. But
I mean, according to our area in the Kidsman, I would agree.
Guilty. Yeah, you can raise your hand too.
Doubled up on that one.
The 2-for-1 special there. But anyway, so that, I thought that was cool. I don't know why. I think COVID had something to do with that being the lowest, but it steadily has gone down like every year since 2010. So
that's good.
It's kind of a cool thing.
It'd be interesting to see if marriage in general has gone down. Like people actually getting
less
married.
people getting married.
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if that's.
Let's just celebrate. Let's just celebrate the.
Sorry,
I bet less people got married.
How many are really Christians?
I don't believe it.
He knows that you can make statistics.
I blame this on my dad. He taught me to be a critical thinker about everything.
It's true though, because you can make statistics be whatever you want them to
and
be.
I'm glad. That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, that says something for sure. For sure, that says something, which is a positive. Yay!
You could say, maybe if it is like people that are getting married, potentially could be more Christians, therefore their divorce rates are lower.
There you go.
Just
add them all together.
Yeah.
It's hard to find.
Like
Some of the stats I found were like from 2008, and I was like, that's way too long ago.
Yeah.
All right, what state has the highest divorce rate? It's just fun trivia here. You probably looked, so you saw it.
Oh,
maybe not. Don't look.
I
Don't look
did
now.
I'll say New Jersey.
Okay.
I was going to say New York.
Okay.
It's probably California.
No, it is actually Arkansas is the highest divorce rate. And
only 12 people live there, right?
something. All right, lowest divorce rates. For some reason, there's 51. Did they include Puerto Rico? Maybe, I don't know. Lowest. Any guesses?
I mean, I would say like Oklahoma, Indiana.
So Vermont is the lowest. It's number 51. New Jersey is actually number 50.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah. So, but you could go.
Yeah.
Maybe less people getting married.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. But Indiana was 13th in divorce. So like from highest to low, like 13th from the top.
Wow.
So pretty high.
Yeah.
So way to go, Indiana. Make us look bad.
No kidding. We got work to do here.
Yeah. I don't know exactly. That's the same study from Bowling Green. But anyway. All right. Any closing thoughts before we finish up here? No?
I just think if you're in a situation where you need marriage help, contact us. We have counselors that we want to connect you with. Don't be ashamed of that. See it as a way that I need to learn, I need to grow together, and we'll be here to support and encourage you and pray with you in any way that we can, because we truly believe that, like you said earlier, and Stu said, God created this before the church.
Yeah.
And so we need to do our best as the church to help it become the best it can possibly be in our communities, in our areas. And so just know that we are here for you. And if you're single and struggling and you need some help or direction, or you want support, you can always come and talk to us as well. We value you. We really, truly believe that God can lead and guide you and do amazing things through you. So never think that you're second-class citizen here at County Line, that we value you very highly.
I would say back to marriage, like be proactive. Like don't wait until it's crisis mode.
Yeah.
If you see something off, like be honest, have a conversation with your spouse, start getting help then. Whether even if it's not full on marriage counseling, but sitting down with one of us and having a conversation, we'd love to be in that seat for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Thanks for listening. Next episode will be on parenting. I had to think about it for a second. Yeah. Same series, but on parenting next time. So tune in next time. We'll catch you later, guys. Bye.